every street in this goddamn town, on every face that's coming round. Tell me a story, I heard them all. Yeah, who's next? You're going home more. Every window knows my name. People bitch, I'm defame. I disappear. So this is one of the songs I wrote in Vancouver, and I'm going to tell you the story of the first chapter very soon. Give me a cup of that Indian's coffee. Have you seen the bomb come and go with ever more glee? Every window knows my name. On every street in this goddamn town. This might be the year I disappear. Yeah, this might be the year I disappear. Yeah. Well, I know every street in this goddamn town, and I know every face that's ever coming around. So won't you tell me your story, hey baby? Don't you know I heard them all? And every corner means a heartbreak. Every alley there lurks a snake. Oh, they say our little town is cursed, 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 cursed. So this might be the year I disappear. This might be the year disappear. You'll find it on my EP Lost Songs. And I'll keep my guitar close by. This is one of the songs I wrote in Canada, in Vancouver. And I thought, now that it's almost 20 years that I've been there, I might as well start telling the story as far as I remember. And what you see here in as my avatar is from St. Stephen's Church on Granville Street. And it's all the way down, and so it's outside Vancouver downtown. I lived on Granville Street, and not only did I live on Granville Street, I wrote that very song we just listened to on Granville Street, and I lived there for about a month and a half or so. And when I first arrived, as I said, this is about 20 years ago, I spent a year in Canada. It's the first time really I spent any significant time in North America. And I did what is called work and travel. It's a very simple principle. You get a work permit for 1 year for all of Canada, and you can work any job and anything that anyone will hire you for. So I arrived in sometime late January, and it was obviously a very cold winter, as it's, I would guess, usually the case. It was in the run-up to the Winter Olympic Games, I now remember, so the city was cleaning up a bit. But Gastown was still called Cracktown, and I'll get to that story much later down the line, not today, but whenever I get around to recording more of these. So what I'd like to perhaps focus on is first what I remember from arriving in that city. It was obviously very cold, and the city itself also has some coldness about it, to a certain degree at least. I stayed at a hostel for, who knows, maybe 3 nights when I first got there, and I always had the dream to go to Canada for some reason. I had that for a long time before I went there, because I associated Canada with, well, obviously with nature and the Rockies, Vancouver Island, and other places I had seen pictures of. And I also thought that it would be a very free country, given how vast it is and how, the opposite of is the opposite of Europe, which is densely populated, completely cultivated. So when I speak of freedom, I don't mean so much political freedom. I mean the freedom from history, the freedom from any sort of metaphysical limitations, the freedom from the weight of history also, and the openness of the horizon, the vastness of the land, which you have in North America, in Canada, and in obviously also in the United States of America especially. So hence the dream, I guess, and also the idea to go there and make music. So I arrived and stayed at the Same Sun Hostel, which I don't know if that's still in existence. Might be. Let me just look that up. Probably is. Which is also on Granville Street. And if any one of you, I don't know, oh, it's temporarily closed, it says here. I don't know if it's still open or not. But anyways, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So on Granville Street, I stayed about 3 nights, met a couple of people. One of them, we got very drunk one night. And, one day basically. I saw I don't know if you can see the thumbnail, probably not. What you can see on the thumbnail of this live stream, though, is is Charlie's music shop. It's no longer now called Charlie's Music. It's actually now called Charles Money Exchange, I think. Probably the same guy running it. And I thought it would be, well, they were looking for people to work there, and I thought it was a used CD shop, so it must be some kind of a cool job to have to work, with music and everything. But it turned out it was pretty well paid, and he paid in cash. But all I did for about 4 or 5 weeks was cleaning used CDs, which for some reason people kept bringing in droves of them. I don't know where they got them from. And so all I ended up doing was standing in the very back of the shop, not seeing anyone for about 6-7 hours every day, except of course for the lunch break. And I cleaned used CDs with 3 or 4 machines. Very monotonous, not very cool or hip or whatever at all. I didn't meet anyone. But I got paid in cash, and he paid in time. His name, well, was not Charlie. He called himself Charlie, but he was actually from Iran, or Persia, as he referred to it. And he came to Canada, I think, in the 80s. He and his son ran this business. The name back then was Uncle Charlie, as I mentioned, and now you can make your own associations. And, well, he couldn't pronounce my name, so he just called me John, which is close enough. It is the English version of Johannes. And to this day, my music alter ego is called John Wouloir. So Mehmet, or Uncle Charlie, once said to me while I was cleaning the CDs, and the good thing about this, I had an iPod back then. If you remember iPods, I don't know if they even make them anymore. I had one of the big ones with one of the first color screen iPods from about almost 15, 16, 18 years ago, whatever it was. And I had so much time on my hand, I could finally listen to all the records I had always been meaning to listen to. So I was listening to music for 7-8 hours every day. And Uncle Charlie once came up to me and said, "You know, John, the people who come to Vancouver, they think the sky is green, but it's always the same old blue. And I do have a song out somewhere, which is called Uncle Charlie. I don't know if it's actually out. I did record it a few years ago. Might be. Let me double check. Yeah, it's on this record here. So, okay. So, I really, so it's this record that I just posted. You can listen to Uncle Charlie on there. He was a very sweet man who had some wisdom about him. And I did enjoy working there, even though it turned out to be something else entirely than what I would have hoped for, obviously, you know, coming from a small town in Europe and wanting to immerse myself in the big city cool kids scene, but that didn't happen in that shop. But I still got to spend lots of time in downtown Vancouver, because that's where it was actually close to Sears. If you remember, anyone listening in from North America, Sears was still in operation back then. It was just the end, I think, of Granville Street, and Granville Street is extremely long. I don't even know where. I think it begins somewhere in downtown and goes all the way down almost to Richmond. And one night I was walking down Granville Street from my house where I lived. I shared a room with some other guy I met, and we went on later to go on a road trip. I'll talk about this some other time. We bought a 1977 Dodge camper van for 800 Canadian dollars, which is, I don't know, what is that? 400 US back then? I was dirt cheap, 30 years old at the time, or a bit more, or less, and V8 engine, and it took us all the way from Vancouver to Tijuana. And well, we drove down the Highway 101 and, you know, State Road 1, so the Coastal Pacific Highway. But yeah, so that's for a different time. So as I was walking down, for some reason at night, Granville Street from my house to, I think, Safeway, one of those big supermarket chain, the groceries, as you say, I saw this beautiful sign that they had out there from St. Stephen's Church, which I think is still, I hope is still, well, I don't know if it's still open or not, but they had this wonderful mantra there: true love waits. And I took a picture of it. And, you know, this is something that is perhaps a bit strange to Northern Americans, but I mentioned this when I taught Jean Baudrillard earlier this year. I mentioned this especially to the American participants of the seminar. I told them, look, when a European comes to America or Canada, and, you know, to be frank, this architecturally, etc., there's not that much difference between the two countries. There's basically no difference. I mean, you have Tim Hortons in Canada, I know, but the rest is the same. Maybe you say a boot, and that's quite funny and endearing, but that's, again, about about it. Anyways, I when a European comes to America, what we see is we walk through a movie set, you know, because we encounter America mostly and exclusively through film and television, and for the most part, most people never even end up going to America. Even just a suburb to us looks like a movie set if we've seen films that are set in a suburban area. The cars that there's cars driving around that we never really even had in Europe. A Buick or a Dodge, either the big new ones or the old ones. We don't know. So it looks like a movie set, and obviously these I don't even know. There's probably a special term for this. I don't know what the term of art is for this sort of church sign. If anyone knows, let me know. But so this looked to me like I was walking through a movie set, and was just so. It was beautiful still, and I still remember seeing it and took this picture, which, as obviously, could be just part of the North American aesthetic mythos. So let me just drink some wine. I spent, as I said, a significant amount of time just cleaning used CDs for money. And during that time, lived on Granville Street, worked on Granville Street, but I didn't live in downtown Vancouver. If I open a map now, I think it was must have been somewhere around Granville Street and 49th Avenue, around there. But on the main street, we had, it was a huge one of these just massive houses that are so unreasonable. When you compare it to, there's nothing that compares to that. At least back then there wasn't, at least not to my knowledge, in Europe really. But we had a tiny bedrooms, extremely overpriced already back then. I think I paid $350 a month for a room that I shared with someone else, and I could barely afford that, to be honest. I had to. So I needed the job, but I also needed the job because that was the idea, anyways, to go to a foreign country and make do with not much support from home, or almost none, so that I could actually learn what that's like to stand on your own 2 feet and to work just a throwaway job and try to make ends meet. So I spent quite a bit of time around Vancouver downtown, and started meeting people. And 2 of the guys that I met, we came up with the inglorious idea to travel across Canada. And to do that, we wanted to do that in March, because one of the other guys, he was about to leave Canada. He was also from a different country, so he had to go back home in April or May. So March was really the only month that we would be able to go. Hence, we thought it's a great idea, just go up to the Rocky Mountains and go to Banff, drive to Calgary. What comes next? Is it Edmonton? I don't remember. And then go through Saskatchewan or Saskatoon, the Flatlands, drive all the way to Toronto and the Niagara Falls, and then up to Montreal and Quebec City, etc. And so we started looking for a car on Craigslist, which I think probably most people in North America know of. When I lived in Seattle, I found my place to live at also on Craigslist. Anyways, so we started looking for cars and had a look at different cars, and I'll get to that in a bit. But we met someone at a bar in downtown who, a Canadian guy from around the Calgary area, who had moved to Vancouver for work, and he told us that it's suicide to try and, without any experience and with not maybe the greatest car, drive through Canada in March, because it's still too cold and we might just freeze to death, especially in the Rockies. So we had to reconsider, and so what we did was, for no reason at all, just say, let's just go to Mexico. So we hadn't even thought of going through America. Just thought, let's go to Mexico, it's warm. And it ended up being that amazing road trip for 4 or 5 weeks down the American West Coast, which is a story I'll tell at another time. And that probably will take several hours to tell, because there's so much that happened on that trip. But I think perhaps what else I could tell is that I bought a guitar. When I arrived into Vancouver, I bought a guitar about a week later. I bought a Takamine 12-string guitar, which I still have to this day, and there's a story of that guitar that it got stolen, but I'll tell the story some other time. I bought the guitar, I started writing songs, and I started playing live as well. I played around, again, most of the bars for some reason were on Granville Street. Maybe I should have called these Granville Street Diaries, but I was just thinking that maybe Vancouver is probably better known to people. So I buy the guitar, I start playing. I played open mics. I started organizing shows already in February when we were still there. Started meeting other musicians and got into the local sort of singer-songwriter, folksy and acoustic rock and rock scene pretty quickly. That's one of the amazing things, I think, at least back then still, about North America. The same thing happened to me in Seattle in 2011 when I played around Capitol Hill and Ballard and other places in Seattle, which and it was so quick that I met other musicians who were all very open and welcoming, and just wanted to play shows. And there were always people in the audience who were listening to the music. The same thing happened to me in Vancouver. Everyone some of them obviously were aiming for fame and try to make it in the business, understandably. But some of them were just there to make music, and the people were there to listen to music. It's very unique. I hope it's still the same. I don't know. But that's something unique that I found to North America, really, that I didn't find or haven't found yet anywhere else, really. So playing the shows, working my throwaway job with Uncle Charlie, cleaning old CDs for 8 hours a day, trying to figure out what something costs, and if you've never really had to pay for anything before in your life, and making plans to go to Mexico, making plans to drive down the Pacific Coastal Highway, not knowing how long that's going to take, or and this is pre really mobile internet, right? So there's not, you don't have an iPhone on you that just shows you the route. You just start driving. But anyways, after about four weeks or so of cleaning used CDs, they no longer. I had to quit because we were about to go on our trip, but there were a few days in between where I had time, and we weren't going yet. So one of the other guys I had met told me to just come out and work a couple of days for a temp agency. And that temp agency is called Labor Unlimited, which I think is still going. And so all you had to do was go down there and show up in the morning at, I don't remember, maybe 10 a.m. or so, or 11 a.m. for an afternoon, late afternoon, evening, basically night shift. So work would start maybe at around 1 p.m., 2 p.m., and you'd be home by midnight, depending, or maybe a bit later, depending where you lived. And when I worked, I met the absolute most fantastic people I've met in in Canada. Was these chaps, these guys in the warehouses. I remember, so there were many natives, or as they say in Canada, First Nations. By the way, one of the prejudices that we had in Europe back then about Canada is that Canada is the better version of America, because in Canada they treat their natives really well, and in Canada they have healthcare for everyone. And let's just say perhaps that was not really the case. In fact, healthcare is not free at all. It's quite expensive. I didn't really have any good healthcare while I was there because I couldn't really afford it, I guess. And the natives I met, they did tell me a bit of a different story, but I'll sing their song another time. But I'll mention a few. So I met, one of them was called Glenn, and he was the last of his tribe. So I think he's still alive, but and he had had a quite a life. He used to be a roadie for Metallica in the 90s and other bands prior to that. I'll tell his story some other time. But he mentioned that when he dies, the language of his tribe will die with him. There was Andre, who always got in fights with his wife. He drove a big truck, one of those massive trucks you would, never see around that time in Europe. One of those ridiculously big black Dodge trucks. I don't really know what they're called, or SUVs or something. I met Rick, who looked like he was, 65 years old, but he was just unstoppable. He was a very bad drunk. He drank about half a bottle of Jack Daniels every day. But he could unload those trucks quicker than any of us youngsters. He kept laughing at us how weak we were compared to him, so we had to prove ourselves to him. So what was the job? It was a very simple job, and it showed me also what, a word that's no longer used for some weird reason, but what globalization means. So as you know, Vancouver is in The West is on the west coast of Canada. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. And as such, it is, of course, the main harbor for for any goods that come in from Asia, which effectively means mostly China. So what we did was, and this is down in Richmond, so already really, I think part of Vancouver, but maybe its own city. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. It is its own. It is on its own peninsula. It's just south of the airport. It's very close to. If you look on a map, it's somewhere around wherever you know. Let me see. To the east part of Richmond, somewhere by the IKEA, maybe. I think that's where it was. There was no IKEA there back then. It was just warehouse after warehouse after warehouse after warehouse. And all that happened was that truckloads would come in, these big cargo units from the ships from China, and they'd be coming in to the warehouse for one reason and one reason alone: to unload and restack. Unload and restack every day. Can you imagine? For 16 hours every single working day, Monday to Friday. Maybe they had weekend shifts also. We didn't work weekends, so I don't know. But there were 2 shifts, as I remember, and you could work morning or evening, or maybe there was even a night shift. So maybe this was just basically going 24 hours of unloading and restacking and unloading and restacking and unloading and restacking. So I was at the very, not the very, but one of the bottoms, you could say, of globalization. So to restack, to reload, to have these goods, air conditioners, television sets, Barbie dolls, God knows what, to be shipped across Canada. And, well, that in just intense, sheer, endless influx of plastic goods, I'll never forget. But I'll never forget the people, for the most part. They were the most honest and in some weird way, some of the wisest people I ever met in my life, and certainly in Vancouver. They were all, by any account, they were all fuck ups. You would say they were all just what people would consider, just basically someone who's not made it in life. They had to work these temp agency jobs to make ends meet, have one 8-hour shift here, and then go to another temp agency for the next 8 hours because you couldn't actually do that. That's not really illegal, but the same temp agency couldn't do it. So these people worked 16 hours sometimes, every single day. And still, they never complained. They never blamed anyone else. And they were, in some way, in a sincere way, always in good spirits. This was, after 4 or 5 weeks of cleaning CDs on my own in the back end of a store. I was just around a bunch of guys, and, the things you can't talk about like that anymore because we've all gone insane. But it was the most wonderful time, and I've not forgotten any of them. And I'll tell more about every single one of them that I had the most to do with in some future episode here. So perhaps I can tell this story though, because this happened right at the very beginning of my. This was just, I think, maybe 4 or 5 days before we went off to on our trip to Mexico down the coastal highway of America. I don't remember his name because I had just been there so briefly, and I only seen that man maybe once before. He didn't arrive for some reason. For some reason, he didn't show up at the warehouse, even though he was, he said he was going to come, and it was the weirdest. It was just he at some point he did arrive, and he was bleeding out of his head. He had an open wound in his head, because he was in a car accident. Someone had hit his car and then drove off. So he hit his head on. I think it's probably I think it may have been that he hit his head on his steering wheel, and he somehow made it, even though he was not unconscious. He didn't completely go out. But it was very obvious that he was in grave pain. But as it goes with these temp jobs, you don't show up. You don't make those $96 before tax, or whatever it was for the 8 hours. And without those $96, maybe over 2 or 3 days, he can't keep up with his payments for his car, perhaps, or bills, or his rent. So he showed up bleeding, obviously in pain, and just swallowed what is it? It's not paracetamol in North America. It's the other thing. I always forget. I used to take these painkillers too sometimes. Whatever you have, there's something with an A or so. He just gulped them down. They told him he shouldn't work, but he said, "I need the money," and then he collapsed. So he collapsed in the warehouse because he needed the money so badly that, his sister had to come and pick him up. And it may have been, I never saw him after that, I hope at least, doesn't mean that he, that's something that it got worse. It just means that maybe because there were so many warehouses, and he may not have been part of the core group or something, who knows. But I never saw that guy ever again. He was maybe in his late 40s or so. I unfortunately never got a chance to speak to him. But I remember that vividly, how he tried to get the hours in, come what may, no matter the bleeding. He hadn't even washed the blood off his head, and because it was such a need to get that money, to be able to. I think if you're at that, you really need those 96 or whatever dollars that they had. And very often these people didn't even have bank accounts, because they weren't eligible for a bank account. And for some, especially the natives, are not eligible for bank accounts for some messed up reason. And that would mean that they had to bring so every day you get a check, you do your hours. The next day you come into the office, you get your check, and then I had a bank account. I was a foreigner. I had a bank account that second day I got to Canada, these people, Canadians, didn't have bank accounts. Maybe it's something that they didn't understand with bank accounts. Maybe they had huge debt or something. They couldn't get one. Some of the natives had different stories to tell why that was, that they wouldn't get a bank account. But here they were. They didn't have a bank account. So if you wanted to cash a check, you had to go to one of those horrible places around Cracktown, Gastown, Cracktown, where many of them lived, and they would charge a pretty substantial fee to get the check cashed. So which would be, I don't know, another $10 or so. So think about that, $10. That's 1 hour of your body aching, unloading plastic shit from China. And then someone just takes a cut of that amount of 1 hour of you aching and doing this nonsense so that you can pay your rent in an absolutely run-down place, probably without, decent heating. Many of them, by the way, lived in some sort of hotels, which I don't think at this point, probably Vancouver's probably just gotten rid of them entirely. They used to be, there's a very fascinating documentary narrated by Charles Bukowski, which is Skid Row. You'll find it here on YouTube. I can highly recommend that one, Skid Row. And if you watch that, you can see the kinds of hotels that were still also open and in operation in Vancouver for people in this situation who would not have a bank account and who would not be getting, hence, any sort of a rental agreement with a normal landlord. So they had to pay for a hotel where very often their rooms would be the size of maybe, 12 square meters, maybe 15, with a single bed that's old. And if they're lucky, maybe a boiler to make some tea and coffee. Maybe a small kitchenette, if even. So their diet was whatever the cheapest street food they could get, if they were single. Some of them actually were paying off mortgages, and others were just so downtrodden they just lived in those Skid Row hotels. One of them, again, of course, was on Granville Street, but I don't think that's still going. I forgot I think it was something like Coliseum or some ridiculous name. Probably no longer in operation, because Vancouver, like so many other cities around the Western world, especially back then, they were already gearing up for the Winter Olympic Games in 2010. So they were clearing out house, Vancouver is the place where, at least back then, for some reason, the homeless population of Canada, that's where they go. I think it's I might have, I may misremember this, but I think it's because Vancouver is a bit warmer than Toronto. Not that much, but at least a little bit. So they were all gathering there from all across the country, and maybe it's just because it's a big scene. But there were stories that people were telling me. I don't know if I've never verified it. I've no idea if it's true or not. Maybe it was just urban legends. But the urban legends going around back then was that they were moving people out, homeless people, on trains. So they were packing them on trains and taking them up north of British Columbia. I'm not sure that's true, but they were trying to clear out the city, clean it up for the Winter Olympic Games. Now, there's something else that's bizarre about Vancouver, is that it's mini Hollywood in some ways, right? There were a couple of big TV series that were filmed, or TV shows that were filmed in Vancouver at the time, and movies. I think the X-Files were filmed there too, a decade before. I got there. So, and if you've ever been to Hollywood or Venice Beach, Santa Monica, etc. in LA, where the actor or the people, the people who want to be actors, who are aspiring actors, there's something peculiar about these places that are so driven by that one industry and the urge, and it attracts a certain type of person, of course, the whoever wants to be an actor. What is that they begin to, because they don't know if someone might be someone in the industry, they're basically acting all the time. That's something I noticed when I spent a bit of time in LA. Not only that, if you have a bit of a weird accent, that they might think, oh, maybe he's a European film producer, and start talking to you just for the reason until they realize that you're nothing. And all of a sudden the conversation just ends. But that people are constantly acting because they never know if that might not, someone who's ever, sitting there in a cafe or restaurant, might become their biggest, that might, turn into their break at some point. They might make it by meeting the right person and having. So it's, I don't know. That's the strangest thing for me about Vancouver was this. And I found there was one moment when I spent, and I met someone who was a homeless man. I'll tell that story some other time. But I spent an afternoon with him, and he was, again, one of the most interesting people I ever met in my entire life. And I cannot say the same for, to be honest, anyone who was anyone really of any significance, so-called, in Vancouver. It is a very cold city, and the architecture reflects that as well. The steel towers, glass and steel towers that have no face and no history. You can meet wonderful people around there, but they will be somewhere else than the main streets. They will be down by the very south end of Granville Street and not by the very north end of it. Except maybe for Uncle Charlie again, Muhammad from Iran, from Persia. He was a gentleman. So I think I might leave it at that for now. That's the beginning, the arrival into Vancouver. The next chapter will be buying the Dodge camper van, which we bought of I think he was a farmer or something. A man who didn't talk. And when he drove us out to his shed where he kept the car, which he told us he's supposedly selling for a friend of his, we were certain he was going to kill us. But he didn't. But he definitely had those. He gave off those vibes. Anyways, so that's the next chapter. Buying the car and then driving down the Pacific Coastal Highway, going to Seattle and Portland, going from Oregon to, I think we drove to, obviously, San Francisco next. Went to Los Angeles, Santa Barbara before that, and spent some time in LA. Went to Las Vegas, spent some time in Las Vegas. Spent quite a bit of time in San Diego, where we ran into some Navy soldiers, I think you can say, and Army soldiers who did get into a bit of a fight. And we got to we did get to Tijuana in the end for no good reason other than wanting to go there for, again, no reason. So, in this song, which was one of the first ones I wrote. This might be the year I disappear. That one really is. That one is. Let me just. All right. I think I saw someone had written that on. Either it was some graffiti, or it was written on a. In a toilet somewhere in a bar. I know. So this might be the year disappear for no good reason. And I saw that, and as always, it's the title that comes first in any song that I write, usually. Usually it's the title. So this might be the year disappear was the perfect title at the time on this very journey. And you can find the song here. I put the link in the chat. And because I was sick and tired of my small town where I had grown up. So I wrote that song about that town and about me leaving, etc., etc. On every street in this goddamn town, on every face that's going around, tell me a story, I heard them all. Yeah, who's next? Young gone them all. Every window knows my name. People bitch, not defame. Oh, give me a cup of that Indian's coffee. You see the bomb come go with ever more glee. Every corner means a heartbreak. Every alley there lurks a snake. Oh, they say our little town, it is cursed, 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 cursed. So this might be the year I disappear. And this might be the year I disappear. I walk through the lines of life, the streets of childhood leave me blind. I call the concert didn't vote. I was 13, she brought me no luck. They say our little town is cursed, that year's best is theirs worse. Yet I know I can't piss off, this time I'm true. This ain't no bluff. This ain't no bluff. 'Cause this might be the year I disappear. Yeah, this might be the year I disappear. Oh, I walk through the lines of life. I know every street in this goddamn town, and I know every face that's ever going around. So won't you tell me your story, hey baby? Don't you know I heard them all? And every corner means a heartbreak. Every alley that lurks a snake. Oh, they say our little town, it is cursed, 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 cursed. 'Cause this might be the year I disappear. Yeah, this might be the year I disappear. Thank you very much for listening. And if you'd like to leave me a comment, that would be nice. If you like the music, you can find it on Spotify, etc. And of course, you can also leave me a donation, which might help continuing the storytelling here. Everything is stories, after all. Thank you very much. Good night.